B. I've had a fucked up family history. It involves all evil spirits, monsters, aliens, and serial killers. We'll post more if interested. I'll start with the picture. This is a crime scene after Ted Bundy visited my family in college. Happened a long time ago. Obviously, I don't know her, but it was a huge thing for my dad's side of the family. After Margaret's murder, my family got splintered and started hating each other. My great aunts and uncles all shamed my grandfather because he married a woman from Central America after his medical discharge from the military. Well, shortly after that, my dad and aunt were born, to a racist southern family at that. Being half Costa Rican, they were outcast and shunned. Fast forward 5 years. My grandpa starting to walk towards death's door, and my grandma, on her way to visit him in Jacksonville's VA hospital, gets T-boned by a semi, and her brain is scattered along the road. She's in a coma for 3 months, forgets her English and French language, and has never been quite right since. 20 years before this, my not yet mother's side of the family, my mom's dad's family lived in the woods of Central Florida all their lives. My great-grandpa, henceforth referred to as Pa Joe, lived in the woods his whole life and was a tracker. After living in the woods and hunting for such a long time, he was offered the position as game warden. Local government said they'd rather have him working for them against them. Go figure. 40 years. He knew the fucking woods, but as time went on, something strange started to happen on the weekly hunting trips. The dogs my family hunted with started acting funny, not right. There was an old mill that paralleled the path they blazed and started down, and one night, the dogs just lost it. They started growling, barking, and baying treed. They knew they had a hot trail. They'd run at my Pa Joe and my uncles and grandpa maybe 2 to 3 miles into the woods, and they'd come to the edge of the swamp. There was the tree. It's legendary in my family. It was a thick oak tree that was dead and hollowed out on the inside. There was no leaves in the branches, just long, reaching limbs. After treeing whatever animal they tracked, the dogs would whimper and cover and start pissing all over themselves and whatnot. The men all looked up into the limbs and couldn't see anything. Flashlights for the smartasses reading. They'd look and finally give up. Odd thing was, it kept happening. Night after night, the dogs would take them to the exact spot, like they were ready to tear flesh from bone. And after a few minutes of baying, they'd start crying and wanting to leave. And then it happened. My grandpa said it sounded like a woman's death knell, screaming, ripping into the night. But for some reason, there was a lower scream at the same time, like it was coming from the same thing. Y'all recall that Pa Joe spent his entire life in those woods. My grandpa said he'd never seen his daddy so scared. "Well, time to go," is all he said, and then ran. Ran back from the tree for another 2 miles, in the dark, and these young boys couldn't keep up with him. Years later, Pa Joe, on his deathbed, told my grandpa and his brothers about that night, and told them the noise they heard was what they called a wampus cat. He explained it was similar to a werewolf or Sasquatch, and was a murderous beast. About 30 years after his death, maybe 15 years ago for me, my aunt and cousin, grandpa's daughter and grandson, were living in an area of southern Georgia called Reno. It's a small, unincorporated shit of land about an hour north of Tallahassee, Florida. One night, as my aunt is doing the dishes, she sees this bright pair of red eyes shine off in the distance. It shakes her, but she dismisses it as a deer or something like that. Then she hears it. She described a horrific sound, like a woman's blood-curdling scream with a deep howl at the same time. She and my cousin were horrified and barricaded themselves in the bathroom with a 30-30 the entire night. The next morning, she left a note on the landlord's door with $427 cash as her final rent and moved in with my grandparents for a while. Fast forward another few years, it's 2001 and my mom, aunt, sister is at work. It's a Friday, so it's slow. She was a computer tech for a Tallahassee school, and me and my cousins and uncle were all hanging out, getting into paranormal stuff, and we're listening to audio clips from people who recorded a strange noise from the Appalachian region of Georgia. My mom played one that was really freaky. Woman scream with howl. My cousin, who was in the room across the hall, came in, flushed white, eyes wide open, and told us that's what he heard when he lived in Reno. Going back in time, this time with my grandma on my mother's side was a girl. My grandma had 3 sisters, of which she is the middle child. She grew up in the city of Attapugus, Georgia. As with most families in the South in the 1950s, they attended morning and evening church services every Sunday. One afternoon, Granny, my great-aunt, and a friend of theirs decided they were going to leave early for church so they could stop by the elementary school and play on the playground. As they were walking, there was a large cornfield to the left of the road, and for whatever reason, be it chance or what the fuck's sake, my grandma looked over in the field and saw a huge beast. It was about 7 feet tall, she would say, had these long hairy arms, and smelled like rotten eggs. They all froze at first, paralyzed by fear, but then they started sprinting towards the church, maybe half a mile up the road. Once they got in there, they locked themselves in the sanctuary and cried. After the older folks started pouring in, they ran and tried to explain everything. After the girls were calmed down, a mini manhunt was started in search for the beast they saw. All the men, my Uncle Lemar, Grandma's brother, and Daddy, included all, scoured the cornfield for any trace of a large monster. Eventually, they found a large clearing in the corn that was violently thrashed, and it smelled of rotten eggs. My Uncle Lemar found a large footprint that looked like a person's, only twice the size. After that, it was referred to as the Georgian corn monster for about 15 years, until the famous Patterson film was released and everyone started calling it Bigfoot, and my grandma told us, "Yeah, that looks like what I saw," and it's become a famous story in the family ever since. Now, after they moved, the neighbors, Linda and her husband, I forgot his name, invited my grandparents over to get to know everyone and told them they were gonna walk the table. They said it was gonna be a good time and should really come over, so they did. After dinner and the usual shit and re-shooting, they decided it was time to walk the table, and one of the neighbors came out with a small end table. They asked everyone to sit around it and put their hands on it. Granny and Poppy declined this round. So quick FYI on walking the table in case anyone wants to try it. I myself never have, just being afraid of what I was told. It's similar to a Ouija board. The table has to be totally made of wood, no metal, plastic or anything, nails included. The lights have to be totally off. It will not work if there's a child or Bible in the room. It may take more than a drunk, "Hey, let's do this thing I heard about" effort. Everyone around the table began asking yes or no questions to the table, and it would bump once for yes and twice for no. As with any normal person, it interested Granny and Poppy, who were almost certain everyone was playing a joke on the new neighbors. Poppy thought really hard, then decided he and Granny would give it a try. As an initial test, Poppy asked the table to make itself so heavy no one could lift it, and it bumped for yes, something like that, and then proceeded to try to pick it up. It wouldn't budge. Poppy, thinking it was a parlor trick, told everyone to move from around it, and then try to push it. Nothing. Other men tried moving it, and it stayed in place. Then, after pushing, lifting a bit, Poppy and Granny sat back down and started again. Someone asked if the table would lay itself in Granny's lap, which it did. Then Poppy, with a certain foolproof plan, asked the table. There was a young man I was in the service with who passed away a few years ago from malaria. What was his name? And they went through the alphabet. The table spelled out the man's first, middle, and last name. Poppy, now shocked, decided it was time to go, because as the new neighbors, there was no way they could have known that answer. Linda asked Granny and Poppy a few weeks later if they wanted to come to walk the table again, to which they declined. After living in the town for a while, they learned that the family that lived in the house behind them were witches that were assumed to be possessed by Satan himself because of the horrible things they could do. As with the walking the table bit, the man, who was supposed to be the most evil man in town, could walk anything he willed. They told him he could lay his hand on anything and it would start shaking and jumping violently. The example they gave was a washing machine on his porch. Later on, after they'd moved back to Tallahassee, good old Linda, who was later referred to as Aunt Linda Buford, moved as well, and she invited Granny, Poppy, Aunt Brenda, and others to all play with the Ouija board. As before, they agreed, thinking it was just a board game. Well, they began to ask it questions, and it refused to answer them, instead telling Linda how in a past life, she died giving birth to a second child. She had her tubes tied after that, and after that, all the board would spell out was, "Charlie is a good old boy." A little history on Linda. Remember the town I mentioned earlier, Casadega? It's where she's from. It's also supposed to be Florida's most evil town. Witchcraft and satanic rituals are practiced more than Christian prayers, sort of like a modern Young Goodman Brown. Now, Linda was a confirmed witch, and many years ago she moved to Germany, where she met a man and fell in love with him. She told him that he was Satan, and that freaked her out. She left him and returned to the States. One Thanksgiving, my Aunt Lucy said there was an evil spirit behind Linda's right shoulder and was following her everywhere. It just so happened that one night, Aunt Linda started having something strange happen to her. Whenever she would lay down in her bed, the rocking chair in her room would start to rock violently, and when she'd stand up, it would stop. I could only assume that after remembering her past and what Aunt Lucy said, she asked her to come over and see what was going on. What she told her chilled her. Aunt Lucy looked at her and said, "Linda, you need to bring this chair and leave this place. The devil himself is in the chair and is looking right at you." Well, obviously Linda flipped her shit and burned the chair and left the house and never practiced witchcraft ever again. To this day, we do not talk about supernatural stuff around her. My mom kind of went off on my fiance at Thanksgiving last year because she asked Aunt Lucy about a different incident, and Linda was at the house. The Blue Lady. This is a story that started about 23 years ago by my Aunt Dorothy, the eldest of Granny's sisters, worked for a lady who ran a daycare out of her home. She said she was a very peculiar person who had strange ways of taking care of children. The weirdest of all is that this lady would not let crying babies be picked up or calmed in any way. Well, this lady was leaving her house to go to town one day and pulled out in front of a log truck and was killed instantly. A few months later, Aunt Dorothy told my Aunt Brenda about the lady's house that died being for sale, and she and my Uncle George purchased it. Bad idea. Maybe a year or two later, my mom and her cousin, Chris, Aunt Brenda's gay son, were spending the night at her house in the spare room. There was a set of bunk beds and Chris was on top. Early in the morning, say 2ish, my mom woke up because Chris wouldn't shut the fuck up. She got out of bed and looked up at him. He was sitting bolt upright, eyes wide open, unblinking, and was given an exact play-by-play of how his uncle was murdered by his wife. He was telling this to someone in the hallway my mom couldn't see, and he was going over the grisly details about how he would come home drunk and beat her, break her arm, and finally, she was waiting with a shotgun and come home belligerent and blew her face off. Please note, he was not at the house when it happened, and when that happened, he was only 3 years old. A few years later, my Aunt Jenna, same aunt from Reno, my mom's sister, Granny's oldest, and Chris were playing in an old camper at my Aunt Brenda's house. For whatever reason, it got really hot outside, so Aunt Jenna stepped out. When she did, she saw a shadow, maybe 6 feet tall, hairy, had tail and horns, and she ran inside, leaving Chris by himself. No, to this day, Chris does not remember the incident with him talking to the Blue Lady. That night, another visit from the Blue Lady, but this time, Aunt Jenna saw her and she was glaring at her. And, as it is with all things, people get older and tend to forget about things. There was a period of maybe 15 years that went by without any significant occurrence. Good things can't always last. So, it is now 1996. All of the kids have grown up. People have passed on. Uncle Mike, not the one who lives with me, bought a trailer to live on his mom's plot of land for his new family to live in. Almost immediately, shit happens. Every day when him and his wife come home from work, all of the pictures on the walls are turned back, facing the walls. It gets more aggressive. One night, my parents and Uncle Mike and his wife and Aunt Jenna are all in the living room, and a fucking lead crystal ashtray lifts into the air, then shatters. Doors slam. Footfalls in the hallway. Shit's getting scary. Then Thanksgiving rolls around. Everyone is full of family time excitement, food, fellowship, etc. But, as always, the paranormal always finds its way back into the conversation, except when Linda is present. Uncle Mike began talking to Aunt Lucy about all the weird shit that's been going on. She tells him not to worry and it'd be okay. Later, all the women are in Aunt Brenda's bedroom, continuing the talk of haunts and haints, and Aunt Brenda's door slams shut. Aunt Lucy, who's only 5'1", stands up and tells the Blue Lady, "You are dead. This is not your house anymore. You need to leave at once." And the door opened. It was maybe 2 years later before anything else happened. Uncle Mike comes back from work, 1998. He sees Aunt Brenda in her nightgown walk back into the bedroom. He's calling after her. She doesn't respond. He follows her all the way to the bathroom, and it shuts in his face. He knocks on the door, no reply. He walks back into the hallway and sees Aunt Brenda washing dishes. He's kinda confused and asks her, "Mom, who all is here?" She says, "No one, just me and the kids. My cousins Michael and Sabrina." Uncle Mike looks back towards her bedroom and says, "Well, she's back, but now she's wearing white. So here we are, everyone now caught up. I've got a few directions to go with this, the alien stuff. Well, probably the most amusing thing is Poppy's story. Him and my grandma were walking on the beach near Daytona, Florida, and he says, I looked up and there was just 3 moons. Wasn't anything weird, they were just kinda there. And then he says, they all just took off into the sky, like they were never there. A few years ago, I was driving from my hometown back to college with my friend in GF, who was reading a book at nighttime in the car. So me and my friend were in the car, just cutting up, bullshitting, when all of a sudden, a plane falls out of the sky. I freak out and slam on the brakes and get out, looking to the area where the plane should have crashed. Instead, my friend and I see some kind of strange shaped light hover for a moment. After a few seconds it got brighter, then vanished. I then realized I did not see a plane. Those were the UFO parts of the story. A few weeks ago, my uncle and I were visiting my grandparents and were outside talking while he was smoking. Funnily enough, we were talking about all the weird shit that our family has gone through in the past. We laugh and head inside. Then he goes out the front door. We were on the back porch before then, to get a bottle of water from a spare fridge in the carport. If I'm not back in 15 minutes, I'm dead. Oh, okay, sure. After a few minutes pass by, I'm assuming he's gonna try to scare everyone in the house, a common pastime in the family. I have no idea why. So I go out into the front door to find him. As I'm walking to the fridge, there's a blue light coming from behind the house. Brighter than a flashlight, but not as strong as a floodlight. And then I hear the sound of like a Christmas tree being dragged through the yard. They live in a wooded area, so there's lots of leaves on the ground. I just kinda brush it off. I'm sure my uncle is trying to freak me out. He is really good at light and sound effects, so I go inside and tell my grandma he's outside messing around. He then walks in from the back porch and is like, did you hear that shit? I walk back out onto the porch with him and just kinda stare at him. 99% sure he was just fucking with me. I asked him what he heard and he told me. It sounded like something being dragged around outside the house, and then physics clicked as well as common sense. If it were him, there was no way he could have had time to A, light a cigarette, be halfway done with it, and me not have smelled it. B, he came in the door on the opposite side of the house. There's a good half acre from where I heard the noise and the back porch and not heard him. C, he is not winded at all. And as I said, he smokes. A lot. I told him I saw the light behind the house and heard a large dragging sound as well. He asked about the light and I describe it to him. Just like above, he looks at me with a kind of disbelieving face and says, he's giving me a quote as I type, I saw a little blue light over Poppy's truck. I thought you were over there with a cell phone talking to someone. He says it was faint blue, like an illuminated phone screen, then it just disappeared. I thought you were walking around the yard. So we decided to go looking around the yard where we heard the noise coming from. Of course, arming ourselves, each with a kitchen knife and a makeshift riot baton. And flashlights, of course. There was a clear path of leaves that had been turned up, but disappointingly, little evidence of what might have been out there. So we went back to the porch and discussed what may or may not have been walking around outside. Maybe an hour after we'd forgotten the yard incident, I saw a faint blue light by the far end of the fence, opposite end of the property where we heard the noise. It was there for a few minutes, but then disappeared. We're not exactly sure what to label the encounter as. We just assumed it was aliens, because what else might it have been? The forgotten Wampus cat story. Maybe 19 years ago, my uncle, same one who's been here, reminded me of something that happened to him when he and my grandpa were camping out on the Oclockney River. It was a fishing trip, and they were there for a few days, but one night, as my uncle, Poppy, and a family friend were sitting around the fire, they heard a noise out of nowhere. My uncle just described it as a really loud woman screaming, woven with a hyena laugh through it. After that, Poppy grabbed his gun, told my uncle to get in the tent, and him and his friend started loading their rifles. That's basically all that happened that night, and he never heard it again on that trip. But after they had gone home, Poppy told my uncle about the Wampus cat, and said that was the same noise that scared his dad in the previous story. On a separate account, my great uncle George went camping with Poppy and my uncle, and said that he woke up in the middle of the night because he thought Poppy might have been awake starting breakfast, but it was something else, walking around the camp on 2 legs. He couldn't make out what exactly, because he didn't have glasses on, and was seeing the silhouette through the tent. He just categorized it as the Wampus cat as well. The return of the Blue Lady. Just recently, the last 3 years or so, my cousin Michael, Uncle Mike's son, see above, and his wife moved into my Aunt Brenda's house with their baby. Keep in mind, no one has seen the Blue Lady since the day she was wearing white. Michael has seen someone walk down the hall in a white gown, but no one comes out, and no one is around when he checks. Remember who the Blue Lady was? The baby, who was 2 at the time, had been reacting to something we can't see. She'll smile and laugh and talk to it. The baby was crying one night, and Aunt Brenda and Michael heard it on the baby monitor while they were in the living room with Uncle George. It was late, so they assumed she was having a bad dream, but then heard shh over the baby monitor. Michael's wife was at work, and no one else was in that part of the house. Ghost hunting shit. We started doing this around 2000. My mom, my uncle, his now ex-wife, and my Aunt Jenna would go to supposed haunted locations around our area. An old Civil War battleground, Civil War cemeteries, etc. Stuff easily accessible with no permission. And we'd walk around in the middle of the night like assholes with video cameras that did not have night vision. On the very first night we went out, we went to the battleground, Natural Bridge, and 2 cemeteries. We did not get anything on tape until we got the Memory Gardens. While walking around, my uncle and his sister saw a giant black shape move out in front of them. Maybe a few seconds later, my mom and I saw a similar shadow move by our legs on the ground. We weren't sure what it was, but at the next cemetery, we got a voice on tape. It was like an old man moaning. It sounded exactly how you think a zombie would. It was really freaky because we didn't hear it audibly when we were out there. We've now been ghost hunting, but we've changed up the party a little bit. My mom and aunt no longer go with us. My uncle and aunt divorced. He remarried. We added my cousin from the first Wampus cat story. So we hit up our usual hotspots. But we tried a new cemetery out. It's maybe 10 miles from the town where my cousin and aunt were terrorized by the Wampus cat. We're doing our normal routine when, at the end of the main row, there's a headstone with claw marks in it, almost at the base. It shocked us at first, but then we kinda laughed it off. No big, press on. Another year passed. We did our annual ghost hunting thing, and when we returned to the cemetery, we looked all over the headstone with claw marks, but we couldn't find it. Whatever, maybe we were mistaken on where it was. And we looked around, did some EVP sessions, we now know what they were called, and actually got some audible recordings. They were incomprehensible, but we got something. And near the end of that particular cemetery investigation, my uncle accidentally kicked over a child's headstone. It was small, so it was nearly impossible to see, and after that, he wasn't too keen on hunting ghosts anymore. That was the last real time we did that. So now, I'm bringing you to present day. My uncle and his wife and my fiance and I live together, but before they made the move, there were really weird things happening in my apartment that my fiance and I were living in. One night, it sounded like someone was walking around, making my puppy bark. Nothing major, but then about 2 months ago, it started getting really freaky after they moved in. I had taken my fiance to school, and my uncle and I were going to a job fair. I'd gone to shower and was dressed and walked into the hallway from our bedroom, and he asked me, "When are you taking your fiance to school?" I just kinda looked at him and told him I'd done that maybe 2 hours before. He gives me a weird look and says, "Okay," doesn't say anything else about it. When we were in the car on the way to the job fair, he says, "I asked you because I thought I saw her walk into the bathroom behind you." Again, he likes to bullshit me, so I was like, haha, yeah, right. But he was genuinely freaked out about it. A few days after the pseudo-fiance was seen, my uncle, his wife, and I were sitting in the living room watching TV when we heard a loud crash from the room. His wife instantly got pissed and was mad at their dog because she thought she might have knocked something over in their room. But the dog is right here. We went to investigate what happened, and their cat's food bowl was thrown across the room, cat food everywhere. Just to give you an idea, the cat's bowl was on a small desk in their room, and the bed was up higher than the desk. We tried to shrug it off, thinking maybe the cat knocked it off somehow, but again, the bowl was all the way across the room. What the fuck again? After my uncle's son moved in with us, we decided we needed a larger place, so we got a bigger apartment. It was kind of a joke at the point that we were in a haunted apartment, and it would be good to have a normal place. Lol, nope.jpg. The very first week we were living here, one of my fiance's drawers flew out from the chest it was in. Kinda rattled me, but I dismissed it as I forgot to push it in all the way after putting clothes up. Then maybe 2 weeks after that, they were all going to gate to eat something, and as we're leaving, our clock jumps off the wall and breaks. Not totally, but some of the body chips off. At this point, we didn't want to scare my uncle's kid, so they were just like, oops, need a bigger nail to secure it. The most recent thing is one night, I was watching TV in my room and my fiance, who was sleeping very heavily, wakes up and just shrinks in the covers and stares at me. I cuddle her, ask her what's wrong, and she says she doesn't want to talk about it. I try to calm her down and ask again. She whispers that there's something staring at her from the corner of our room. She doesn't want it to hear her, and she doesn't want to look at it. I looked too where she told me and couldn't see a thing. I was thinking maybe she's still kinda stuck in her dream, but she made me turn the lights on, and she just stayed awake until it got light out and went to sleep. I asked her about it later that day. She said she can't remember what it was, but it really scared her. Like, she didn't want to talk about it because she was afraid she would see it again. Fuck, just got reminded of one short occurrence 15 years ago. Michael's sister, Sabrina, was at my Aunt Brenda's house and was washing dishes. She turned toward the back door to put some dishes up and heard a thump and small footprints running away from the other side of the door. Thinking it was maybe a cat, she opened the door to see if it was one of the cats wanting to get inside. Nothing there. She happened to glance at the window and saw two very small handprints in the dust. Like Barbie or something was hanging there, looking inside. Honestly, I have no idea what that might have been.